Hello, I'm your host, Belkin Vanderspuds, and this is Cast Iron Cooking, where we explore all kinds of recipes and ways to protect your cast iron pans. So join me in this next video as we explore more interesting cooking with cast iron cooking. Welcome back to Cast Iron Cooking. I'm your host, Belkin Vanderspuds, and today we're doing a frittata at home. So this is how to make the best frittata ever. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to cook some bacon, and we're going to add to it some biscuits, and then we're going to cover it with a scrambled egg mixture with bell pepper, onion, mushroom, cheese, and onion. Don't know if I mentioned the onion. And this is a simple recipe. You can do this at home with common ingredients, and it's variable. If you don't like a particular ingredient, like a bell pepper or the particular type of onion or mushroom, you can replace it easily with what you really want to use. I'm starting off with a preheated cast iron pan skillet for the bacon, and I've preheated the oven to 375. This is kind of a fun recipe to do because it doesn't take a lot of work and there's not a lot of pressure on time. The biscuits take about 11 or 12 minutes. I'm using pre-made Grand's biscuits, which are available at most grocery stores. And this is thick cut bacon. So I start off by cutting the bacon. I make a pile for the amount of bacon that I want, and then I end up cutting it up into what I consider bite-sized pieces, but that's up to you what a bite-sized piece is. And I don't even break it apart. I basically will cut it into these little stacks and add it to the cast iron skillet, which again is preheated. This is important. If you don't want your food to stick in cast iron, preheat up to the temperature that you're going to cook or bake in. In this case, we're baking. So I'm going to take and just spread it out a little evenly. I'm not worried about how well it's spread out because it's going to heat up and start falling apart. So we put it in the oven. Again, it's at 375. And while it's heating up, we're going to prepare our other ingredients, starting with our Grand's pre-made biscuits. And you can use whatever biscuit you like, or you can leave them out. In this case, it gives the frittata a really interesting finish in that you've got this nice fluffy biscuit that completely cooks inside of the frittata itself. And when you're eating it, it just kind of adds filler and flavor, but it's not overwhelming at all. So setup for this is really easy. We just take them out of the shipping container and we spread them apart and prepare to put them into a preheating pan. And next we're going to be getting our eggs ready. The eggs are a basic scrambled egg mix, and it's really easy. I crack the eggs on the side of the bowl, and before I put the eggs in, I take the Kraft 4 cheese Mexican shredded cheese, about a cup of it, and add it to the bottom of my pan. Again, your discretion. If you like more cheese, you can add more cheese. Next, we're adding heavy whipping cream, and about half as much whipping cream as you used for your cheese. So if you put a cup of cheese in, put a half a cup of, you can use milk, a little salt for flavoring, of course. And then I break 10 large eggs into my mixing bowl. Large or medium eggs is fine. And in this case, I'm using 10 eggs because I'm making a large batch. If you have a smaller skillet, you can use fewer eggs and just kind of cut the recipe in half. Now I'm going to check on the bacon. Well, actually first I'm going to pull out both pans. I was preheating the one pan for the biscuits while cooking the bacon. So I'm going to take a flat spatula, and essentially this is kind of fun. You just squeeze all those little stacks of bacon and they spread apart. Now that they've started warming up the bacon and cooking the bacon, they'll fall kind of apart. And I really kind of enjoy this part of it. And you mix it up to try to separate as much of the bacon as you can so that it'll heat evenly. And you put the bacon back into the oven to cook. Again, it's at 375 and you're not in a big hurry. Next, we'll take those biscuits and put it into a preheated pan. Notice I didn't grease the pan beforehand, the skillet. And that skillet of biscuits goes in on the lower rack below the bacon. And it's going to be about 10 to 12 minutes, depending on your oven. Meanwhile, while the bacon and biscuits are cooking, I'm going to chop up my eggs and bell pepper and get my little can of mushrooms ready to mix together. And essentially I'm cutting it up into bite-sized pieces. Now, how you add this to your mixture is up to you. The recipe is flexible enough that you can add the peppers and the onions and the mushrooms to the bacon before adding the eggs on top to allow them to cook down a little bit. In this case, I like the fresh crunchiness that happens if you put them in with the scrambled eggs. Notice how I'm cutting up this bell pepper. I cut it into 4 pieces and I don't cut the top off. I just peel the 4 pieces from the seed pod. Makes it a lot easier to cut apart the bell pepper that way. And then I just trim all the unwanted bits from the pepper. And my hands are kind of big, so I can use this large knife. You'll probably need a smaller paring knife if you have smaller hands. But you just make sure that you've got all of the seeds out, and you take your pepper. And again, I'm slicing it into what I consider to be bite-sized pieces. This is flexible, depending on how small you want it. I like them a little larger so that it does add a little texture to the meal itself, to the frittata itself. Gives it a little crunchiness. And this isn't rocket science. I cut it lengthwise and then cut those strips into smaller bits. And I'll store those into a container so that when I'm ready to use them, I can just pour them out of the container. It makes it nice to kind of keep everything in order. And next is the onion. I cut it in half first, and then I cut it into strips. In this case, the onion I had has a little green bit inside of it, and it's perfectly fine, pops out very easily. Because there's no other green in the meal, I'm taking the green little growth bits out of it, just so that they don't show up and distract you when you're actually eating your meal. And the onions go into its own little separate storage bit while I get the mushrooms prepared. Mushrooms are easy. You just pop the top and you pour the excess water off, and then your mushrooms are basically ready. So I'll pour that water off and take the lid off, and it's ready to go. So now, with just a fork, I'm going to add the mushrooms and the onions and the peppers. And remember, there's already salt in it. And what I want to do is mix these ingredients thoroughly. So you take your fork and go all the way to the bottom, get all the cheese and cream thoroughly mixed in. And the other reason I'm using a fork is to fluff it up. You want some air in your frittata because when it's baking, it'll expand and make it fluffy. So next, we're going to check on our bacon and the biscuits to see if they're ready. So the biscuits are looking pretty good, and I'll be ready to use those. So they're cooked. And what I'm going to do to prepare the biscuits is I'm going to take them out of the cast iron skillet and put them onto the cutting board. And I'm essentially going to cut them in half. So In this case, for this recipe and this size skillet that I'm using, it's not actually going to take all the biscuits. Oh, and by the way, the knife I'm using has a serrated blade so that I can kind of saw through it. You see that serration on the knife. Instead of trying to cut the biscuits, I'm actually sawing through them. And I'm not going to use these 3 biscuits. I'm going to set them aside. And out comes the bacon. The frittata itself is going to be cooked in this cast iron skillet where the bacon is cooked. So the bacon is cooked down like I like it. It's not really crispy, but it's well cooked and well browned. And what I need to do is pour off the excess bacon fat. Bacon fat is good. I can use it later with those other biscuits and make some biscuits and gravy. So we pour it off and we spread our bacon around. And essentially what I'm doing is making sure that all the bacon bits are cooked. And then I'm going to spread them out and allow space for the biscuits. I want the bacon around the outside of the biscuits and on top of the biscuits, not necessarily underneath. So we'll take our biscuits and we'll spread them around inside the skillet. And then once we get all our bacon spaced in there, we're going to try to our biscuits spaced in there. I'm going to flip up some of the bacon on top of the biscuits. And this way, when you pour the egg mixture, the scrambled egg mixture in, it will have bacon throughout the meal. When you slice into it to take a bite, it'll be completely done. And I'll stir up my scrambled egg mix again. And this is to fluff air into the scrambled egg mix. And now it's pretty easy, starting in the center and working around to the outside. You want to cover all of the biscuits and bacon as well as possible and as evenly as possible. This isn't rocket science again. A little variable in thickness is absolutely fine. And you just even it up with your fork and it's ready to go into the oven. And again, it's at 375. Now, you can raise the temperature up to 380. I wouldn't go higher than that. And essentially, every couple of minutes, every 5 minutes or so, you keep checking it. It'll take about 20 minutes, and you'll get a nice even browning around the top of the frittata. So the choice, you can make it a lot browner than what I've done here, but that definitely is cooked. Now you want to take your long spatula and you want to run it around the outsides first and then run it underneath the frittata to make sure that the eggs are separated from the skillet. And lovely cast iron, it does not stick very much to the cast iron. So I cut it next into pizza type or pie type slices. So just whatever size it is that you're wanting to eat, you just cut it out with your spatula and put it on your plate, and you're ready to eat your frittata. The best frittata ever. Look at that. Very delicious, evenly cooked, melted cheese, delicious. So now you cut out and serve however much that everybody who's eating wants to eat. And this concludes our how to make the best frittata ever recipe walkthrough and how I do it. I hope you enjoy. Bye. Well, look at you. You made it all the way to the end of this video. And I really want to thank you. I appreciate you for sticking around and watching the content, because you being here really matters. Without you, my doing this is pointless. You are my sunshine, and I hope to see you again. Again, my name is Belkin Vanderspuds, and I've been your host here at Cast Iron Cooking. I hope you come back and watch some more videos. And if you'd like to give me a thumbs up, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel. Cheers.